Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the #1 rated fantasy and betting podcast. And today we're going to be talking about the Thursday, the showdown slate, the one game from a player props DFS and betting standpoint between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New England Patriots. Both of these teams played earlier in the week last week, so you might actually remember their performances. You ended up seeing the big Rhamondre Stevenson game, the big Quez Watkins screen pass for a touchdown, and then, some other things here and there during those games. But you probably weren't able to tell how many players were playing, how many snaps, and how many routes run the receivers and running backs and tight ends had, and what the overall yards per attempt for the quarterback. So all that stuff I've spent the last 3 to 5 days for every single game, all 16 games, 32 teams last week. Any player that took a snap, I have their snaps logged, their performance log, their routes run, whatever it might be, all logged. It's on Patreon for all you patrons. It will be releasing for the specific day that those teams play games. So for today, we have it for the showdown slate. And as I see right now, we've got a 5-page document on notes, everything you need to know. And when I say everything you need to know to have the biggest leg up possible on the competition, whether it's the bookies in the betting market, player props, or DFS. As always for these showdown slates, if you're playing DFS, it's going to be the defenses that are going to stand out. That should at least one and probably both be in your lineup because they'll play the whole game, and they do make for strong captains. Wide receivers will be your best preseason captain options in general, but it's always important to look at the specific slate. I think this one has some nice receivers, and we'll talk about them. But let's start with the quarterbacks. You don't have to roster a quarterback, but the quarterbacks in this game, and we haven't gotten news as of this recording. I'm recording this on Wednesday afternoon. We haven't gotten news on how much the starters are going to play exactly, and we'll be live tomorrow, so if we get that news, if and when, we can always cover and answer your questions before the game start an hour before on the live stream. So be sure to hit the notification bell so you know when that's happening. But the main quarterback that stands out to me, and there's two of them, but the main one would be Mac Jones in this game. And that's because in the first preseason game, they said, hey, Mac, go out there and play 55.9% of the snaps. He had 33 snaps in that game, and he ended up playing very solid. It was the just cut, dink and dunk, and over the top. There you go for one of them, just out of the reach of Gunner last week. So I do think that this is a nice spot for Mac Jones to yet again play a half of football, if not a little bit more. I do think Cam Newton plays maybe an extra series, but you see potentially less than 24% of the snaps like last week for Brian Hoyer. So Mac Jones is somebody who stands out. Now, you don't have to play quarterback. I don't think you have to, but if there's going to be a guy in a game to play half the game, not many guys are going to play more than that than Mac Jones. Jalen Hurts, if you want to take the risk, would be the other quarterback to play. He played 10 snaps, 22% of the team snaps last week. He had a rushing attempt. He looked fine. There was like 2 drops. It was like 4 of 7 overall, mainly to tight ends on 4 of those targets, 1 for Goddard and 3 for Ertz. So I think he's fine if you want to go there. If we get news that he's going to play a half, he's potentially the best play on the entire slate thanks to his mobile upside. Right now, I give the edge to Mac Jones based on where we're at. Any other players at the quarterback position that stand out, it would be Cam Newton, just because if you saw increased run, he might play a quarter and a half, has some mobile upside, but I'm not looking to play him. Now at the running back position, we actually have some news. Kerryon Johnson injured his knee, and then he was quickly cut by this Eagles team. Miles Sanders did not play week 1. Now, I would expect Miles Sanders, if the starters take snaps, to play in this game, so just track that status. But even if that's said, even if he plays a drive in this game or two and takes the Kerryon Johnson usage, you still saw a lot of usage for who I think might be the best and is, in my opinion, the best running back play on the slate right now, and that is Kenny Gainwell. Now, there's 4 running backs who all stand out nicely, but Gainwell ended up leading the team with 19 snaps at the running back position last week, 9 more than any other running back. Now, we didn't really have carries, but that's been this thing. If you've been tracking the camp news, and you probably haven't, because who does except for psychopaths like me, but if you're tracking the camp news, he's not getting carries in camp all that much right now, Gainwell, in terms of their actual scrimmages. He's basically just catching passes, but for PPR formats, we like that, whether it's prize picks for the player props, Draftkings, we do like that. So he only had 2 attempts, but he ran 13 routes, and he ended up seeing 4 targets, which gives you some upside there. So when I say best play in this slate, I think best play at the running back position from the Eagles side. We'll get to the Patriots running back, who I think is the overall best options moving forward. Other than that, Jason Huntley on this Eagles team, right now it looks like he's not going to make the roster unless he can somehow push Jordan Howard, the veteran. I don't think that's going to happen. They brought back Jordan Howard for a reason, but Huntley should see some more work. Last week, you saw Huntley play the second most snaps at the running back position. He had 10 snaps. He led the team in attempts, albeit it was just 4, and he saw 5 routes run for 2 targets, so not that much overall work for him. He had 6 opportunities in that game, though. Now, if we move to the other side, the guy who's going to stand out the most for me in this game is J.J. Taylor, and everybody's going to say, what do you mean Rhamondre Stevenson was way better? He was, but a lot of that came on a 90-plus yard touchdown. I know he had 2 total in the game, but J.J. Taylor was involved in so many different ways. He played 27.1% of the snaps. That led all of the running backs, including Rhamondre Stevenson, with 16 running back snaps. He also ran 11 running back routes. That was 8 more than Rhamondre Stevenson. And how did that help J.J. Taylor? Well, he ended up catching all 5 of those targets for 31 yards. Now, I don't think, again, on 11 routes run, he's going to see 5 targets, but if he runs 12 routes in this game and sees 3 or 4 targets, a real possibility, and has 3 or 4 receptions, that's massive upside. I mean, right there, including the yards after the catch, you're probably getting 6 or 7 fantasy points, which is just a very high hill for Rhamondre Stevenson to climb, who's probably not going to have that much passing usage like last week. Now, I do like Stevenson. He's one of the 4 best running back options. Right there is 2 or 3 behind Gainwell, probably, and also JJ Taylor. He's right there, but you have to take into account if you're playing in tournaments, he's going to be highly owned because of what he did last week, and nobody really paying attention to preseason all that much, except probably you for watching this video. Shout out you. But for the most part, everybody's going to say, oh, I remember seeing him on ESPN. He had that big run. Oh, look at his stat log. He went off last week. Why would I not play him? So you have to factor in the ownership to an extent there. I still do like JJ Taylor because he has the dual threat ability when Stevenson is mainly just going to be a rusher. Now, a bigger back in the fourth quarter against worse defenders, you might see what he did last week again. So Stevenson, for me, is in play. He played 25% of the snaps last week. He had 15 snaps, 1 less than JJ Taylor, but he only ran 3 routes. That was the downside. He did have a team-high 10 attempts, but I'm not going to bank on the 10 carries for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those 10 carries, which are a lot, even if he sees that much volume again, it could very easily be 10 carries for 37 yards and no touchdowns. There's no real passing game upside here for him. So those would be the main 4 running backs for me. Now, there's other guys in play depending on what the news that we get. Damian Harris, if he plays again and plays a quarter or more, he's in play. Definitely touchdown upside. If Sony Michel sees as much usage as he did last week, seeing double-digit snaps, he'll definitely stay in play. Jordan Howard with no Kerryon Johnson now, although Jordan Howard not the greatest last week, did not get used all that much. Averaged 1.7 yards per carry last year. Has to be in play if there's no carry-on, and now he sees an extra series. Same exact analysis could be said for Boston Scott. We'll get more news on exactly what those guys are going to do. If they see similar usage to last week, not really interested. I'll take the other 4 guys. If there's expectations that 1 or 2 of them are going to see more usage, we'll talk about it tomorrow on the live stream. It will also all be updated on the Patreon rankings. We have the game notes, those 5 pages, but also ranked tiers. So exactly my number 1 priority down through probably my number 15 to 20 priority for this game. You can check it out not just for the showdown slate, but the multiple games on Friday, the big slate on Saturday, and we have games on Sunday and Monday this week. So 5 straight days of football. It's fantastic to say that. The only time I think we'll get that all year long. So check it all out down below. And before we get to the wide receivers, I want to talk about some of the running back props that I've taken. I've taken the over 4.6 fantasy points for Kenny Gainwell and over 4.7 for Jason Huntley. Now, I will say the Huntley, and this is on Prize Picks. You can check it out down below. If you want your chance at a free, yes, FREE, yes, that is free, $100 bet up to $100. You can use the code SAL. Might as well use it. The preseason, we've been absolutely dominating. Every single slate last week, we ended up winning and profiting big time last week. We're talking multiples, thousands of dollars in the Discord were won, not just from myself, but a bunch of people. So Jason Huntley is my concern because there is a chance that he just plays 10 snaps and they say, you know what, we know we're going to cut you. We're not giving you a lot of usage. So that would be my concern if you don't want to take him. But I do feel good about Kenny Gainwell. I think Kenny Gainwell runs 12 to 15 routes, sees 2 to 5 carries in this game, probably leads to 3 to 5 targets. That type of usage of 6 to 8 opportunities for a pass-catching running back to just score 4.6 points in the preseason, I think I take that there. So the over on Kenny Gainwell, the over on Jason Huntley. Unfortunately, they're raising the overs on these guys, but no Kerryon Johnson helps. Those are the 2 running back props I've taken. I've also taken 2 receiver props. We'll get to those after we talk about the receivers, but you can use that code SAL to take advantage of that. So now we can slide into the wide receivers, and I think there's 2 that stand out from an opportunity standpoint from either team more than anybody else on this slate and what they did with those opportunities. The first one is Christian Wilkerson, who is the bottom of the depth chart for the Patriots trying to make the team. Does look like a solid guy out there just in terms of his overall stature, and last week he played 32 snaps, second on the team at the wide receiver position behind N'Keal Harry. 54.2% of the game he was out there for. He ended up running 21 routes, and he led everybody with 8 targets. And he fit really well into this Mac Jones scheme. Jones was targeting him often in terms of just these short, quick, 4 to 10 yard routes. Wilkerson was making defenses pay. He was being able to get open on those underneath type routes. He had 6 catches for 39 yards. It's not going to jump off the page in terms of yardage. He had 3 slot snaps, which led this team, but that overall volume is fantastic. So he has to be in play. He's somebody that I do think that production can withstand because of the massive volume that he got last game routes run-wise. Now, the other guy is the complete opposite in terms of his production. The usage was similar. You saw N'Keal Harry lead every single player on the Patriots last week in overall snaps, 36. He played 61% of the snaps, N'Keal Harry. 2 years ago, their first-round pick, but he did nothing with those snaps. He only ended up getting 1 target in the game on 23 routes run, a team-leading 23 routes. But I'm not going to just take 1 game for it. If we get another 30-something snaps, another 20 to 15-plus routes run out of N'Keal Harry, I'm going to take my chances with it because in the preseason and in showdown, we need to take advantage of opportunity. And he had double than what most guys get in terms of their usage in the preseason. So we'll go back to the well with N'Keal Harry and Wilkerson from the Patriots side. Now, I know what you're saying. My number 1 overall play last week on the Eagles slate was Quez Watkins. And he ended up, he just missed a deep touchdown. Jalen Hurts overthrew him by about a step, beat his guy from 3 steps. But then his fast speed ended up showing off, his fastest of fast speeds on the entire team, when he took a screen from Joe Flacco to the house. And it ended up paying off for us from our tiers, the number 1 overall ranked receiver and player. In week 1, he did play 14 snaps, which is not that many. He just took advantage of his opportunity. 20s. He only ran 12 routes in week 1 because he's important to this team. They're saying that he's pushing for the number 3 wide receiver job right now. So it's going to be Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, and Quez Watkins is pushing for the number 3 wide receiver job. So if that's the case, if he's actually going to be a starter, yeah, he should be treated like a starter, or he's not going to see a lot of usage. So he saw 12 routes last week. That's decent. He had the 120-plus yard target and then that big screen touchdown. But for the most part, 12 routes run is not going to get it done for you more times than not. He's a quality player out there, but I think he's going to be over-owned for this game. Still in play, but I think you should only expect around 10 routes run for him in this game, and that is a concern compared to guys who are going to be running 20 routes in this game. On the flip side of that, last week you got the production from Quez Watkins on less usage, and you got no production on more usage from J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, the former second-round pick. He ended up seeing 22 snaps last week. He led all of the receivers with 14 routes, so more than Quez Watkins, and all he got from that was 1 target. That being said, he put up a goose egg last week. Nobody's going to own him. He's going to be out there. He is trying to fight for a roster spot for a guy who does have skill, not just size, but massive speed. Again, I know there was a goose egg last week, but he's going to be lower owned, and he's probably going to see more usage than a Quez Watkins. I like Arcega-Whiteside this week. And then after that, you can see a lot of guys getting some usage. Last week, Travis Fulgham actually played 19 snaps. He ran 15 routes. He saw no targets. Same exact thing for Greg Ward on Philadelphia. These are guys that played a lot in the game. Ward had 21 snaps last week. He ran 16 routes, which ended up leading to 0 targets, though, but he was out there a lot. Same exact thing for another starting receiver in Jalen Reagor. Played 17 snaps. He saw 3 targets. Ended up catching a ball, dropping a ball on 12 routes run. 12 routes run is not great, but I think he will be lower on. These are some other options now that we're getting down the list. I have a lot of wide receivers in play. I think this week right now on my list right here, there's like 12 guys, 13 guys that I'm actually going to rank for this slate. We just named a bunch of them. Other guys to consider, Jacoby Myers played about 27% of the snaps week 1. He'll remain in play. Again, not a priority, but once you start getting to that wide receiver 6, 7, 8 guy, he's in that range. Isaiah Zuber is somebody to point out. He played 22% of the snaps, but only ran 4 routes and saw 3 targets. You're not going to get a 75% target rate moving forward. So just keep that in mind. If you're like, oh, this guy had a couple catches last week, I'm definitely going to start him. Just keep in mind, he only ran 4 routes last week. That's not good usage. Gunner is another guy who continues to run routes in the preseason now since 2019 to 2021 in their first game, and he's just not great. He almost had the deep touchdown if he would have ran under it a little more. Mac Jones barely overthrowing him. If anything, it was just a bang-bang play. But for the most part, he's running short, shallow routes, and he just doesn't get separation. He's in play because he's going to run 12, 15 routes in this game, but not great. Another guy, a former Charger, Andre Patton, a veteran. He played 19 snaps, the second most routes, 13 routes run, and 3 targets for the Eagles. Keep that in mind. He's kind of a 0 in terms of getting separation, but he was out there a lot. Very similar to Whiteside last week, put up a goose egg, but was out there a ton. They both ran the highest routes on the Eagles. So Andre Patton is a very sneaky name, who I don't think is a good player, who from the NFL couldn't get separation. In the preseason last week couldn't get separation, but he got targeted. I think it's a sneaky name that won't be that highly owned at the wide receiver position. So as we finish up receivers, these are the 2 receiver props I've taken so far. And I plan to take more. The showdown slate, though, you just don't have many options to choose from. But as we get more news, I'll take more overs or unders. And these are the 2 guys. The guys we just talked a lot about in terms of snaps and routes run leading the Patriots. Wilkerson with 8 targets, right? So over 3.3 fantasy points. I think that's the best prop on the board right now. I think no matter what, he's going to lead to probably 4 to 5 targets in this game of short distance. You have 2 receptions, and it's really difficult in a point per reception prize picks to not go over that. N'Keal Harry is a question mark, right? He ran a ton of routes, highest snaps, highest routes last week, and did nothing. He is fighting for, I think he has a roster spot, but he's still fighting for some sort of usage in this offense, if not a roster spot, if he keeps laying goose eggs in preseason games. So I take N'Keal Harry over 3.5 points because I think he runs 20 routes. I think he probably sees 3 to 4 targets in this game. We're hoping for 1 big reception or 2 decent receptions. You could use that code SAL, S-A-L, and that will get you a free match up to $100, a limited time offer. Check it out on Prize Picks, just player props, over-unders. They also have stats. They have different sports. Check it all out while the offer is lasting. And outside of that, I don't really want to own tight ends. I do think that some tight ends are interesting from last week. The main one being Tyree Jackson, former college quarterback. He played 20 snaps. He ran 15 routes, so he was basically like a receiver out there, and he had 4 slot targets. So they used him as a slot wide receiver. That's elite for a tight end. He ended up seeing 5 total targets, 2 catches, 32 yards. So if you were ever to play a tight end, it would be Tyree Jackson because he's being massively used. Zach Ertz only played 7 snaps, but saw 3 targets, had a drop during that time as well, overthrown on another one. So Zach Ertz, this might be somebody you say, I want to play this guy. If the starters get more run, I'm down to do that. If you see 12 to 15 snaps out of Zach Ertz and double his routes run. But other than that, it's really just Tyree Jackson. You saw Jonnu Smith get hurt last week, not expecting him to play in this game. The only Patriots tight end that's even worth mentioning is Matt LaCosse. He's an NFL veteran. He played 54% of the snaps last week, and he ran a crazy 20 routes, but 0 targets. This guy ran 20 routes last week for the Patriots, but 0 targets, and he's a tight end, not going to be heavily involved in the offense like you saw last week, but at least should be worth mentioning that he was running a ton of routes. He was 3rd on the Patriots with those 20 routes behind just Wilkerson and N'Keal Harry. So that's where I'm at in terms of just the analysis for this game. It's a relatively quicker video because it's just one game, but we'll have videos out for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for DFS. We have season-long content going out, so the Fantasy Football 2021 playlist, it'll pop up at the end of this video. Be sure to check out all that stuff so you can dominate your drafts. So I appreciate y'all tuning into this video. I will see you all live tomorrow, an hour before the game starts, and in all the other videos for the week. If you're still here with me, hit the like button and let me know in the comments who's your favorite play for this showdown slate. Chat with you all tomorrow.